everybody I've talked to that has tried doing these exercises has either barfed afterwards or come really close to it. And what you have to do is dislodge the otoliths. They're just, it's like you have a little bit of an avalanche and everything is stuck at one end. This fluid, if you become dehydrated, you ever notice how if you really start to become dehydrated, you can become dizzy? And you go, this doesn't really make sense when you think about it. I mean, until you think about it. And what's happening is by dehydrating, you're affecting the fluids in your middle ear. And dehydration affects everything in you. And as you experience this form of dehydration, you have dizziness. So the important thing here, stay hydrated. If you have vertigo, be prepared. Vertigo is really disorienting. On occasion, people will get viruses, viral infections, middle ear infections, frequently middle and inner ear infections. Did I say middle earlier? I meant inner. Middle and inner ear infections can all lead to some form of vertigo and some form of dizziness. And the room can be spinning at such a rate that you really can't move, you can't walk. What's even worse with this type of spinning is, once again, you're dizzy. One of the things you do when you're dizzy, you lie down, close your eyes. Lie down, go in the dark. And for many forms of dizziness, that helps. Not with this. When you get dizzy in this way, you close your eyes and it's like you just put the gas pedal down and the spinning just gets really going. And the next thing you know, you're not feeling well. So, I just want to wrap up the vestibulocochlear nerve. Auditory pathways are extremely interesting. This figure in your textbook approaches these pathways in a very similar way as it did with the visual pathways that we're going to be coming back to. So here's your cochlea. Here are your signals coming in to the cochlear nuclei here, the ventral and the dorsal. Synapses, we have them crossing over to the other side. We have the synapse here, the synapse here, with the superior olives or the superior olivary nuclei. We come on up, we synapse with the inferior colliculus, synapses going out then to the medial geniculate. So this is, we talked about the medial geniculate nerve, nucleus the other day, and now you can see how the signals actually get there. What you should also notice are, once again, the multiple redundancies in here. We're not really spectacular at hearing. We're pretty good. Most of the time, when you hear a sound, without even attempting to do it, if you hear a sharp sound in some direction, your head will turn toward that sound. And the question is, how do you calculate where that sound is coming from? It's all done by differential input to your two ears. So that when you hear a loud sound over here, this ear picks up more sound than this ear, but the signal's going to both sides of your brain. You're then going to respond by moving your head. Your head automatically turns towards sharp sounds and flashing lights. So if you want to get somebody's attention, flash lights and make sounds, and they should pay attention to you. And the other thing is with hearing is that once it goes from the medial geniculate nuclei to auditory centers, you are going to start interpreting sound. Sound is pretty complex. You have environmental sound. I think we've touched on these in the past, maybe not. But environmental sound, you have the sounds of language, and you have the sounds of music. Your brain automatically puts puts sound into one of those three categories. There'll be times when you misidentify sound, where you will hear an environmental sound that sounds musical, and you'll equate it to music. Or you'll hear a sound that is language, and you won't quite be able to interpret it because it's musical. And some languages are tonal. You know, we have a language that's about one of the most flat languages on the planet. There's very little inflection, there's very little change, there's no tonality, and English is pretty straightforward. Other languages kind of cross through this whole area where you start to confuse language and music. So it is interesting. Was it Kung Bushman that had the clicking language, clicking sound? You know that? You heard of that? Where you talk about it sounds like something out of a Star Wars movie, but it's a South Central African language dialect, and the clicking is part of the language. So you should be able to trace through the sounds coming from an ear getting to the geniculi. Okay? So we're cool with all this? Now, whoa, I have no idea what just happened. Let's see if I can undo it. Yeah. But this is only one component of the vestibular cochlear nerve. These are the cochlear. Excuse me. Thank you. These are the cochlear components. Now, you also have the vestibular components that come in. And the vestibular components, in many respects, are much more interesting. Vestibular components tie in to the vestibular nuclei. Vestibular nuclei are a whole group of brainstem nuclei. They're actually associated in part with the cerebellum. And once those signals come in, they're going to move in several directions. Number one, they're going to affect the vestibulospinal tract. You remember the vestibulospinal tract? Well, here we have some inputs that are going to affect that. But then the signals are going to travel to the brain, to the cortex for interpretation. And I want you to pay attention. Abducens nucleus, trochlear nucleus, oculomotor nucleus. What are all those involved with? Vision, sight, moving your eyes. It's not that, this is not coincidental that these vestibular pathways are moving in between all of the nuclei involved with vision. What happens, when you take your head and rapidly spin it around looking at things, trying to pay attention to things? You get dizzy. It's not because your eyes are moving, it's because you are tying in vision with vestibular function, and things get crazy. So, okay? Please take the time to read about the vestibular cochlear nerve. It is really an intriguing nerve. Not that the rest of the cranial nerves aren't. The glossal pharyngeal, number 9. Oh boy, glossal, tongue, pharyngeal, pharynx. We can look at what's going on here as it comes out from a group of nuclei centered in the brainstem, lower brainstem here. This is the medulla oblongata. This, right, technically right in through about here. We're now in the spinal cord, and we have nucleus ambiguus, nucleus solitarius, and the inferior syllabatory nucleus. These three nuclei we are going to be revisiting. So start, make a list. These are 3 nuclei that you have to pay attention to. Signals here are going to innervate the parotid gland. They're going to innervate the posterior third of the tongue, the carotid body, and the carotid sinus. Carotid body, carotid sinus is involved with blood pressure issues. We have the posterior third of the tongue, which is taste, overwhelmingly bitter taste, and the terminus of swallowing. And then we have the parotid gland here, which is a major gland involved with secretions in the mouth. What disease is it involved with? Mumps. That's the gland that swells. None of you, my guess is none of you have had mumps. That would be a pretty safe guess. That's probably one of the most successful childhood vaccines we've developed. The vagus, number 10. Numerous centers for the vagus. Once again, we have nucleus ambiguus, solitarius, the trigeminal nucleus, which isn't so much involved here, but there are some centers right around it. The vagus has a little bit of innervation in the throat area. That's great, that's wonderful. But the majority of the vagus passes through the throat area. Once again, we're at the carotid sinus, the carotid bodies, a limited number of musculature associated with the larynx, and then it's all of the parasympathetic innervation of your visceral organs. So, heart and lungs, liver, spleen, kidneys, stomach, your whole alimentary canal. So there's a lot going on here. We could spend hours talking about the vagus. Vagus is a really important nerve. Yeah.
You said most of it went to that. What was the other part that it went to?
So in the throat area, we have carotid area up here. So we have the carotid sinus once again. We have the larynx, some musculature involved with the larynx, the laryngeal area. So if you have a problem with the innervation of this, you'll have some speech problems. Sometimes people will develop speech issues where they just can't make all the sounds because your vocal cords are in here. And if that is not functioning properly, you can't produce sound appropriately. So the glossopharyngeal over here, once again, we've got the parotid, we've got the tongue, we've got the carotid bodies, a little bit with pharyngeal muscles. So we're going to have 3 cranial nerves involved with the back of your throat and swallowing. It is a very complex maneuver when you're actually taking a mouthful of food or water and swallowing and trying to do other things after that. The accessory nerve or the spinal accessory nerve. Textbooks go back and forth with what they want to call this one. It's important to remember there are cranial nerve components coming out here, and there are spinal nerve components coming from down here. This is a rather complicated nerve, and it's involved with neck muscles. Once again, when you think about this, you've been in a car accident, they check your neck to see how you're moving. Once again, they're not necessarily looking for damage to the muscles, they're looking for nerve damage. They're looking to see if there's any nerve impingement. Sometimes with encephalitis or meningitis, you get a stiff neck. That stiff neck isn't because the muscles are stiff, it's because the signal's coming through here. have been called.